Oh, hello everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, because we're on a Friday. Oh my goodness me, it's the end of the working week. Where did that go? Just especially when, like, if you're like me, I hope you're not like me, but because I work to regular deadlines, is you think, oh, we've got a week to go. Nah, it disappears very, very quickly. Anyway, here we are in the library, and we've got the Blur Effect on tonight. What are we reading? The brilliant Ghost Stations 5. And that's the thing, is I just had a look on my bookshelf. I don't think I've got Ghost Stations 4. So at half time, might go and have a look and see if I can buy it. A couple of things I want to try and buy at half time, and tell you about adventures we had yesterday. Right, what are we drinking tonight? We are drinking Gecko Mexican Salt and Lime Lager. Not a lager drinker, but 3.4% by the Bad News Beer Company. It says, cruise into a zesty coastal breeze with a crisp base of Pilsen malt with a hint of Vienna's gentle toast. Vienna's, yeah, gentle toast. Zingy lime and a pinch of salt awaken the palate. Bright citrus, herbal spice, and floral notes from Magnum. Sorry, Tet Nanga and Motico hops shine through. A super crushable, sun-soaked lager like a cold cerveza with lime. Cerveza? I don't know what that is. 3.4%. So brewed and canned for Bad News in the EU, imported to the UK by Beer 52, blah, 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 blah. www.badnewsbrewery.com. Where are they based? It doesn't say. Never mind. Let's pour the rest of it out. Let's go on with the ghost stories, because then as soon as I've done the ghost stories, I can go downstairs, have some supper, and watch some goddamn football. So there we go. That's the Gecko Mexican, I don't know if you can see that, the Gecko Mexican Salt and Lime Lager. So there we go. Not bad. What are we washing it down with? The Balmuir from Lidl. Blended Scotch whiskey, distilled, blended and bottled in Scotland, oak aged 3 years. Lovely stuff. Really do like this. We've got snacks. Like I say, we've got adventures to talk about half time. We've got things to buy at half time. So shall we crack on with, I've got to try and see, where did we get up to? Where did we stop reading the other night? Right, yes. This is one that we skipped over. Yep. Right. The Ghosts of the South China Seas. After the Second World War, Captain, later Major Robert Keith Jones was with a war graves unit serving the war crimes investigation. I had met several odd occurrences with first-hand knowledge, which I can only describe as supernatural, he said. There can be no doubt that some force occasionally manifests itself, with which the layman either rejects or accepts as the supernatural. Major Jones has been all over the Far East following service in Burma, and is one of the very few who have been all over Java, Sumatra, Malaya, Burma, the Death Railway, and most of the lands and islands in the South China Seas, looking for evidence of war crimes. He explained, I should explain that the job entailed a vast amount of investigation as to how soldiers and civilians had met their death during Japanese occupation of the Far East. As many as possible were exhumed from the far-flung graves and reinterred in the massive cemetery at Singapore. And if some were found to be buried with their hands tied behind their backs, they'd obviously not died from natural causes. During this particular incident in 1946, I was based at Singapore. I was provided with a 61-foot RASC motor launch capable of about 8 knots maximum speed with an army crew of 4 men, the skipper being a corporal. My instructions were to investigate some burials on various islands south of Singapore and as far south as the Sunda Straits between Java and Sumatra. In fact, on this particular occasion, I landed on every one of the islands in the Rio and Lingga archipelago. The sea was like a mill pond for the whole month of my stay afloat. The sun was high and bright every day, and nothing happened which was in any way out of the ordinary. Beside the crew of 4, my party consisted of myself in charge of the operation, a staff sergeant, and 4 British other ranks, all of whom were trained soldiers who had been through the war in Burma, were intelligent men and amenable to discipline. A specific task was to find and recover the remains of an Australian nurse and doctor suspected of being murdered by the Japanese in 1941. I had been given the names of the victims and the island on which they were buried, and they were quickly dubbed Frankie and Johnny by the crew. The bodies were recovered, or what few bones remained of them. Each was wrapped in a blanket tied with wire, labelled and placed one on each bow seat of the launch, protected by the bow but otherwise open to the sky. They had been buried side by side on the island, with Frankie on the left and Johnny on the right, according to which end of the graves they were viewed, but such was the state of decomposition, it was impossible to tell which was which. They were placed in the same relative positions on the bow seats in distinctive blankets, so that even had the labels been washed off or the remains dislodged during heavy seas, which one normally expects in the South China Seas, we would know which was which. Further, the crew and my own men were given strict orders that the bow position of the launch was out of bounds except in an emergency, and on the orders of the skipper. And to make it very clear, I then drew a white line across the deck 6 feet back from the bows, so that all on board knew the area that was out of bounds. We then started back to Singapore. Need a drink because my throat's closing up a bit here. Slange me, wow. So what's this? Breaking character for a second. Mexican salt and lime lager. Okay, I'll give it a go. That's very quaffable. Not bad. Not bad, very nice. The following morning, the position of the blankets containing the remains were reversed, i.e. Frankie was on the right and Johnny on the left. I returned them to the original position, called the men together and told them that I was displeased that my order had not been obeyed. All assured me that no one had been near the bows, and the skipper added 2 points. 1, that sailors were superstitious and would not go near dead bodies anyway. In fact, my own men had to do all the handling. And 2, that he had been on the bridge all night, that it had been bright moonlight all the time, that the bow of the launch had been in full view of the wheelhouse all the time, and that no one on board had been further forward than the bridge amidships. Nothing happened all that day, but the following morning, the position of the remains had again been reversed. Once again, I returned the remains to their original position, called the men together, and expressed in strong terms that I considered someone was playing a joke, that I did not see the funny side, and left them in no doubt as to what would happen if they did it again. I was nevertheless assured that nobody had been near the bows. Their protestations were strong, not to say indignant, that I discussed the matter at some length with my staff sergeant, and we decided to remain on watch together all that night. We both accepted the fact that the crew were not to blame, and that our own men would not play such a practical joke and contravention of a direct military order. I may add that the relationships between everyone on board, including myself, were most cordial, and there was no alcohol consumed while sailing. What little canned beer we had was locked up at sea. We were on the return trip to Singapore with several days sailing ahead of us. Nothing happened all day, but the following morning, the position of the remains were again found to be reversed. Neither my staff sergeant or myself had seen or heard anybody. Neither my staff sergeant or myself had seen or heard anything. Nobody had come on deck. We had remained all night watching the remains, talking and smoking. We were observed by the skipper from the wheelhouse all the time, and there was no possibility of all three of us having even dozed, let alone fallen asleep. Perhaps there is a supernatural force at work. Strange, but true. But that is not the end of the story. Let me first add that Captain Jones and his men were at sea for a total of 1 month, 2 weeks out and 2 weeks back to Singapore. That would mean, after calls, about 1 week with the corpses, which were handed over to the war graves authorities in Singapore. Major Jones returned to England in 1948 and many times pondered the strange, eerie incident of Frankie and Johnny. In 1966, he sent to General T.C. Lethbridge at the Institute of Psychic Research, "I have received a long reply dated July 1966. Let me read it again. In 1966, he sent to General T.C. Lethbridge at the Institute of Psychic Research. Doesn't say what he sent, but anyway. "I received a long reply dated the 27th of July, 1966, said Major Jones, in which he said that the whole thing was perfectly natural, normal, and probably a seaman with small powers had wished the corpses elsewhere, but only managed to change their positions. That I do not accept, nor did Major Jones. To do it once might be able to think it was the answer, but to do it 6 times, you must look for a supernatural answer." Lethbridge based his reply on Professor Rhine's research. He said that he had reasonably demonstrated that such things can be done by mental power alone. Thus, the incident of Frankie and Johnny can be classified under the heading of poltergeist phenomena. And said he would plump for one of the superstitious crew who was unknowingly responsible for changing the position of the corpses. So I'm thrown again by Bruce Barrymore Hulp and his weird punctuation. See, right, we'll get to the end. But that answer I do not accept, and it is the supernatural world that provides the answer to the ghosts of the South China Seas. Right, okay. So he says, thus the incident of Frankie and Johnny can be classified under the heading of poltergeist phenomena. He's put a full stop in there, but it should be, and said he would plump for one of the superstitious crew who was unknowingly responsible for changing the position of the corpses. That should all be one sentence. There shouldn't be a full stop there. Bruce, you and your commas, mate. Yeah, I'm just going to go back. Yeah, sorry, this is, yeah, we're not going to show you that. It's photographs of Japanese war crimes and it's all a bit grim. So let's crack on, shall we? Let's have some lager. What is this? Mexican lime and salt lager. So Slangsby Bar. And we will have a bump as well. Cheers, me beers. Oh, we're back with Captain Jones again. Oh goodness me, this one's a whopper. Strange happenings at Royal Air Force Surabaya. On another occasion in 1946, Captain Jones was sent to investigate the crash of an RAF bomber at RAF Surabaya. The bomber, a Vultee Vengeance, had mysteriously crashed on the airfield and the crew suspected of being murdered. It is interesting to note that Number 84 Squadron was using its Vengeance bombers to bomb the Japanese just south of Homolin in Burma, when suddenly they were taken off operations with the old Vultee Vengeance bomber and re-equipped with de Havilland Mosquitoes. But they had a sinister problem with the Mosquitoes, and for some unknown reason, they were withdrawn and were never used against the Japanese. A great pity, said Corporal Smith of RAF Ground Staff. The old Mozzie would have blasted the yellow bastards off the face of the earth. I do apologise for that. I'm just reading what's written here. At this period, Captain Jones was stationed at Sonabaya in Eastern Java. I'm trying to make sure he's got the spelling consistent here. In Sonabaya in Eastern Java, while most of his unit remained in Singapore. For that reason, he had to use Japanese prisoners of war as labour, and it was they who made the 12 coffins. Captain Jones explains. The boxes were about 6 feet by 2 feet by 18 inches, simple and plain. We had completed the gruesome task, putting what remains could be found into the plain coffins, and I was just taking a rest. Suddenly, one of the coffins started walking away. Onto one side, then its front, then the other side, then its back, and so on. We all froze in amazement. Nobody was nearer than 6 to 8 feet at the time, mostly sitting down and resting. After the initial shock of seeing the coffin walking away, the Japanese fled, and I had to bring them back by firing over their heads. The reason? Your guess is as good as mine. It could not have been the sun warping the wood, for the coffin did not falter in its movement and only came to a halt after hitting a case some 30 feet away. So what made the coffin walk in the noonday sun at RAF Surabaya? Were those murdered by the despicable Japanese trying to haunt them? It is the fact that the Japanese are great believers in the vengeance of their ancestors, and the Japanese have a lot to answer for. Let us look at the facts and hear what the Right Honourable Anthony Eden, Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, had to say in 1944. Speaking in the House of Commons on the 28th of January 1944 on the treatment of Allied prisoners in the hands of the Japanese, Mr. Anthony Eden said, I fear I have grave news to give the House. Members will be aware that a large number of postcards and letters have recently been received in this country from prisoners in the Far East, and that these almost uniformly suggest that the writers are being treated well and are in good health. There is some doubt from what we know about particular areas that some of these communications, at any rate, are in terms dictated by the Japanese authorities. I regret to tell the House that information which has been reaching His Majesty's government no longer leaves room for any doubt that the true state of affairs is a very different one so far as the great majority of prisoners in Japanese hands is concerned. The House is aware that a very high proportion, perhaps 80 to 90% of the prisoners and civilian internees in Japanese hands are located in the southern area comprising the Philippine Islands, the Netherlands, East Indies, Borneo, Malaya, Burma, Siam, and Indochina, and that the Japanese government have hitherto withheld permission from any neutral inspection of any of the camps in question. We have not even been allowed to know the numbers of prisoners detained in the various areas, nor have the names of a large number of those who have been taken prisoner by the Japanese yet been communicated to us. For some time past information has been reaching His Majesty's government regarding conditions under which prisoners are detained and worked in some of these areas. And as it was of so grave a character as to be likely to cause distress to relatives of prisoners and civilian internees in Japanese hands, His Majesty's government felt bound to satisfy themselves that it was authentic before making it public. We are now satisfied, and it becomes my painful duty to tell the House that in Siam there are many thousands of prisoners from the British Commonwealth, including India, who are being compelled by the Japanese military to live in tropical jungle conditions without adequate shelter, clothing, food, or medical attention. And these men are forced to work on building a railway or making roads. Our information is that their health is rapidly deteriorating, that a high percentage are seriously ill, and that there have been some thousands of deaths. Here I may add that the number of such deaths reported by the Japanese to us is just over 100. The railway and roads concerned lead into Burma, and the conditions I have described apply throughout their whole length. One eyewitness report of a camp in Siam said, "I saw many prisoners clearly. They were skin and bone, unshaven, with long matted hair. They were half naked." The same witness reported that they wore no hats or shoes, and this, may I remind the House, in a tropical climate where the neighbouring country is virtually uninhabited, so that there are practically no local resources which could provide medical or other material relief. Oh, it's just so grim. I really don't want to carry on reading this, but we're committed. Of one other part of this huge southern area, we have some information. From Java comes evidence which leaves no doubt that many of our prisoners are confined in camps with no adequate protection from malarial infection and lacking in proper provision for sanitation, except insofar as prisoners may sometimes obtain food from local sources. The food and clothing provided is insufficient to maintain them in health. Reports from the northern area have referred to the emaciated state of prisoners arriving from Java. I have so far no information to give the House regarding conditions in other parts of the southern area. Before I leave the southern area, there is one exception I can make to what I have said. There are civilians interned in our old military camp in Changi and in the neighborhood of Bangkok and Saigon, and our information suggests that conditions of those particular camps are at least tolerable. The refusal of the Japanese government to permit neutral inspections of camps in the southern area is difficult to understand in view of the fact that they have allowed visits by neutral inspectors, though on a scale which we cannot regard as adequate to camps in the northern area, which comprises Hong Kong, Formosa, Shanghai, Korea, and Japan itself. His Majesty's government are reasonably satisfied that conditions generally in this area are tolerable, though, as the Secretary of State for War has said on more than one occasion, the scale on which food is provided is not adequate over long periods to maintain the health of prisoners. I should add, however, that conditions in Hong Kong appear to be growing worse. If that were the whole of the story, it would be bad indeed, but there is, unhappily, worse to come. We have a growing list of cases of brutal outrage on individuals or groups of individuals. I could not burden the House with the full tale of these, but in order to give you an idea of their nature, I must, I fear, quote a few typical examples. The first two cases affecting civilians. The first is that of an officer in the Shanghai Municipal Police Force, along with some 200 other Allied nationals. He was interned by the Japanese in the detention camp for so-called political suspects at Hai Phong Road in Shanghai. He incurred the displeasure of the Japanese gendarmerie and was taken to their office in another part of the town. When he emerged from the building, he was practically out of his mind. His arms and feet were infected where ropes had left deep scars, and he had lost 40 pounds of weight. He died within a day or two of his release. The second case comes from the Philippine Islands. Here, on the 11th of February 1942, 3 British subjects escaped from the Japanese civilian internment camp at Santo Tomas, Manila. They were recaptured and flogged by the camp guard. 2 days later, on the 14th of February, they were sentenced to death by a military court, despite the fact that the international law prescribes the imposition of only disciplinary punishment for attempts to escape. The firing party used automatic pistols, and the 3 men were not killed outright. I now turn to cases affecting soldiers. A number of Indian soldiers captured in Burma, having had their hands tied behind their backs, were made to sit in groups by the side of the road. They were then systematically bayoneted from behind in turn, each man receiving apparently 3 bayonet thrusts. By some miracle, one man who collapsed subsequently recovered and escaped to our lines. That's how we know. The other case concerns an officer of a well-known regiment of the line who was captured in Burma. After being clubbed across the face with a sword, he was tied to a stake and rope was passed around his neck, so that only by raising his body could he just get enough air to keep him alive. He was then subjected to further torture. Fortunately, an Allied attack developed, the Japanese fled, and the officer was rescued by a British tank. The third case concerns a transport called the Lisbon Maru, which was being used to convey over 1,800 British prisoners of war from Hong Kong. Conditions on board were almost indescribable. The prisoners were seriously overcrowded. Many of them were undernourished, and many had contracted diphtheria, dysentery, and other diseases. There was no medical provision, and the sanitary arrangements were virtually non-existent. 2 of the prisoners in one hold died where they lay, and no attempt was made to remove their bodies. On the morning of the 1st of October 1942, the vessel was torpedoed by a United Nations submarine. The Japanese officers, soldiers, and crew kept the prisoners under hatches and abandoned ship forthwith, although she did not sink until 24 hours later. There were insufficient lifebelts and other safety appliances on board. Some of the prisoners managed to break out and swim to land. They were fired on when in the water. In all, at least 800 prisoners lost their lives. I have said sufficient to show the barbarous nature of our Japanese enemy. He has violated not only the principles of international law, but all canons of decent and civilized conduct. His Majesty's government have repeatedly made the strongest possible representations to the Japanese government through the Swiss government. Such replies have been received. Such replies as have been received have been evasive, cynical, or otherwise unsatisfactory. We have the right to expect that, once aware of the facts, the Japanese government will remedy this state of affairs. The Japanese know well what are the obligations of a civilized power to safeguard the life and health of prisoners who have fallen into their hands. This was shown by their treatment of prisoners in the Russo-Japanese War and the War of 1914 to 1918. Let the Japanese government reflect in time to come, the record of their military authorities in this war will not be forgotten. It is with the deepest regret that I have been obliged to make such a statement to the House, but after consultation with their allies, who are equally victims of this unspeakable savagery, His Majesty's government have felt it to be their duty to make public the facts. Those are the facts. That is the reason why the coffin walked. It was in shame for Japanese atrocities of war glossed over. In 1945, a defeated Japan that had inflicted horrendous atrocities on all prisoners of war and their Asian neighbors expected the worst from the conquering heroes. By this period, Edom was dancing to the American tune. What about war crimes? Instead, the Americans made them what they are today. But what about them being tried for war crimes? The Germans were and still are, as we have seen recently in Israel. That is why the coffin walked at RAF Surabaya. Yeah, sorry, Bruce, that is absolute nonsense. That was just voyeuristically going through horrible bits of history, linking it with some quite distasteful anti-Japanese sentiment, and just that's rubbish. Disagree with you there, Bruce. Slange. In the magnificent Rush beer glass. Goodness me, we're at half time. These have been long stories tonight. The magnificent Rush beer glass, courtesy of viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States. Slange me var. Cheers me beers. Right, we're going to do and more, and then we can dive on with the news stories, and we can do half time. The Haunted Squadron. In April 1931, Number 40 Squadron was reformed as a bomber squadron at Upper Heyford, the squadron badge being a broom, and it was not long before it became known as the Haunted Squadron, with the broom taking on a more sinister meaning. We've read this one before, we'll read it again. During the First World War, Number 40 Squadron had served on the Western Front as a fighter squadron. It disbanded in 1919. On the 26th of September 1933, Number 40 Bomber Squadron was returning to its home base at Royal Air Force Abingdon in Berkshire after exercises in Scotland. During these exercises, the squadron had used the old Royal Flying Club aerodrome at Montrose. Number 40 Bomber Squadron was the first service squadron to use the airfield as a base since the Erie disaster that depleted Number 2 Squadron in 1914. As Number 40 Bomber Squadron flew southwards that September morning in 1933, a strange supernatural event began to unfold, almost a rerun of Number 2 Squadron's disaster, who had returned at the same time. Flight Sergeant Christian and his passenger in Fairy Gordon K-1732 encountered thick mist over Northumberland and disappeared. The earlier incident was in 1914. Number 2 Squadron left Montrose and headed south for Neverhaven on Salisbury Plain on the 15th of May 1914. They were to take part in exercises, but over Yorkshire they flew into thick ground mist. Lieutenant John Empson and A.G. Cudmore in a BE-2A, number 331, attempted to land at Hutton Bonville near Northallerton. The aircraft went through a hedge and overturned, killing Empson and Cudmore in the process. After an almost identical disaster with Number 40 Bomber Squadron, many high-ranking people linked the accident to the supernatural influence associated with the old aerodrome at Montrose, still fresh in the minds of many service personnel being the ghost of Montrose Aerodrome. But the 40 Squadron incident was much more mysterious. A day after aircraft Fairy Gordon K-1732 disappeared, an aircraft wheel was washed up on the east coast and Christian's body floated in 3 days later. The body of his passenger was never found. And stranger still, aircraft K-1732 was never on charge to 40 Squadron. It was struck off charge on the 26th of September 1933, the very day this aircraft is said to have crashed. How very, very strange. I'm with you there, Bruce. I think that definitely deserves a Slange me var, half-time. Oh. I think it's time for some Japanese. After that dreadful story, we'll have some Japanese-style rice snacks. Japanese-style mixed rice snacks. These are lovely. Right. Off time. What did we get up to yesterday? It was a two-reg railway trip yesterday. Exciting times. And so we went down to that there, West Somerset Railway. And we got the train down to Blue Anchor and did a little walk from Blue Anchor Actually, we were going to walk from Blue Anchor into Dunster. Then we decided we'd overshot Dunster Station, so we were going to walk into Minehead. Then when I checked the map, realised, no, we haven't overshot Dunster Station. So we ended up going to Dunster Station. So very short walk, actually. It was only three and a bit miles. But we walked through the holiday village and the lakes there. So this was Incroyable, ladies and gentlemen. Incroyable. So let's go to share screen. Here we go. So there's myself and Reginald in front of the sign at Blue Anchor. And there's Reg chatting up some lady in the waiting room. And I was helping her out. I was showing her the route and everything. Blue Anchor, love the flower displays. This is one of the things I love about being on Heritage Railways, is that they maintain the gardens to the period standard, and these are beautiful. I mean, I see this and I think that's what my garden should look like. So I might save up a bit and perhaps get some flowers for the summer. I don't know. Anyway, got the beer burps coming on, folks. Here we go. The beer burps at 37 minutes and 56 seconds. I do apologize. Oh, it turns out I didn't share the blessed picture. Goodness me. Right, let's try it again. There's me and Reg, Blue Anchor. There we go. It says Blue Anchor. There's Reg chatting up a lady in the waiting room. There's me offering her assistance with a map. And that's Blue Anchor, the flower displays. Like I say, I'd love to have that kind of thing in my garden. So bit of planning, bit of saving some money. We can do it. Anyway, old coastal pillbox there with Minehead in the distance. Love this. Absolutely brilliant. That was ragwort growing on the beach. Very, very nice. That's one of the paths. That's heading out towards Minehead. This was great. And it's just a brilliant walk. Absolutely fabulous. Another pillbox in the middle of a field. And that's us at the sluice gates for the storm drains, rather. So there's the storm drain running inland. There's the storm drain running outland into the estuary. And another wartime relic. This is brilliant. I love it. I absolutely love it. This was a little bit of Photoshop. This was Dunster Castle in the distance, and I decided to put it into Photoshop elements and gothic it up a bit, but hoping to have a trip out here towards the end of summer with friend Laura, because she wants to visit Dunster Castle. So fingers crossed. Then we went to the holiday village. I'm trying to remember what the name of the holiday village is. Let me just look it up a second. I'm so OCD that I've got to look up what it's called. Dunster. That's Dumpster. So the holiday village is called Dunster Beach Holidays and Dunster Beach Chalets. So that's pretty much it. Reg and I, we had some tea at the Kingfisher kiosk at Dunster Beach. Dunster Beach Holidays, yeah, that's the name of the place. So yeah, it's just loads and loads and loads of chalets. Absolutely brilliant. But round the back of the chalets is this lake, which Reg and I have been on. We visited this before, but we decided that as it was advertising the fact that there was a nature trail that you could walk, that's what we did yesterday. Utterly brilliant. So that's on the approach to the lake. And there's the bridge going across it, and there's Reg walking across the bridge. Loads of big fish in the water, rudd, tench. Reg knows him, he knows his fish. But this is the route. It's just absolutely brilliant. Really, really good. It was a hot day in the end, so very nice to have some shelter. And there's Reg ploughing on as usual. And then we finally got to the end of it, and then it loops back round and joins up again. So there's another bridge over the lake. And there's the lake again. Absolutely fabulous. We'll be doing this one again easily. Absolutely brilliant. Nice little waterfall there. Then we were back walking out towards Dunster train station. Now, we've done the reverse route of this loads of times. So this was the first time we were doing it the other way around. So and we passed that rather posh place. I'll have that if you don't mind. And then finally, here we are at Minehead, and that's I'm trying to think what the name of that train is. Earlstoke Manor. So it's a Manor class GWR locomotive. We had a cream tea in Minehead High Street. I've done it the Somerset way there, obviously. Jam first, cream after. And there is North Hill, Minehead. Absolutely brilliant. Walked up there a couple of times. It's quite interesting when you see photographs from kind of like 100 years ago. There are no trees on it. So they're a fairly recent addition. And there is the harbour and Minehead harbour there in the distance. That was one of the locos at Minehead Station. And that was the walk. So there we go. 3.18 miles. Not, by our own standards, not a massive walk. But we enjoyed it, and it was great fun. And we had a cream tea. So winner, Christmas dinner. So I'm just going to have some more snacky mix. Oops. Dropping it all over the floor here. You're good health. What did you do on Friday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, but instead it was a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head eating Japanese-style rice snack mix from Lidl. We are definitely getting some more of these. Need to check the football scores. Oh, well done. Australia had taken Egypt to extra time. Well done, Aussies. Right. Part 2 of the show. Did we read these ones? I don't think we did. No, these are nice and short. Ah, that's the other thing I got to do. I need to get a copy of Ghost Stations 4. Ghost Stations 4. So I am not paying £17.99 for that, if you don't mind. No. Ghost Station 7. Oh my goodness me. £19.99. I don't think so. I've got Ghost Stations 2. I've got that one. All right, let's go online, shall we? So Ghost Stations 4 shopping. Should better get it on eBay. Oh, here we go. Ghost Stations 4 True Ghosts. £7.58 on eBay. Yeah, that's quite a reasonable price. Might go for that. Depends what the what's the postage on it. Oh, postage, free Royal Mail second class. Yeah, okay. We'll do it on the app then. What did you do on that Friday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories, but instead was treated to a confused man from Dudley buying more bloody ghost books on eBay. Right, it's me. So let's just do it. Use right, okay. No, I don't want to do that. Oh. Try again. So eBay's being a little bit tricksy here at the moment. And it's not letting me in. Oh, well, we'll do it afterwards. We'll do it afterwards. Whilst I'm waiting for me supper to cook. The Gremlins. Oh no, we've read that one. We have read that one. I do apologise. Okay, we'll do the Phantom Pilot. I'm sure we read that one before, but it's a nice short one. So, after a bomber role during the war years, Royal Air Force Middleton St George, known as Goosepool, became a fighter airfield in June 1956, and its operational life started in this new role when the Hawker Hunter F6s of 92 Squadron and the Gloucester Meteor NF-14s of 264 Squadron arrived in March 1957. Both units stayed until the following September. Shortly after the departure of these two jet fighter squadrons, a Phantom Pilot was seen in and around the mess area. Almost everyone who has seen the Phantom Pilot say the Phantom figure looks real but ashen, as if dazed, and is wearing flying kit. It is possible from the many eyewitness reports, for the details never seem to vary, that the Phantom Pilot is that of a National Service pilot who crashed his Meteor jet whilst training. Apparently, he had landed for a touch and go on the old 10 to 28 runway, which now houses the air terminal, when an engine cut out. There is some speculation as to whether the pilot was aware of this occurrence, as he attempted to take off with full power on the remaining engine. This I am reliably informed by a pilot who was there at the time. See, two thises. This, I'm reliably informed by a pilot who was there at the time, doesn't need another that. This should be was a definite no-no with the twin-engine Meteor jet, and it proved to be so, for the aircraft became uncontrollable, slewed off the runway, and continued the relatively short distance to the mess, striking a parked car on the way. The jet fighter crashed into the mess wall, dislodging some masonry which fell through the canopy and killed the pilot. The crash led to a string of very strange events, eerie events, which could be why the Phantom Pilot haunts the airfield. It was very strange that the motor car which was damaged in the crash belonged to the pilot, and the section of the mess into which the Meteor jet crashed was the pilot's own room. And if that was not enough, the term used by Meteor pilots when their Meteor suddenly dropped one wing, for there was a tendency for the Meteor to drop one wing, for there was a tendency for the meteor to drop one wing quite suddenly, was Phantom Roll. That definitely deserves a thunderclap. Ba-ba-bum. I think we'll have some more Japanese style rice snacks, if you don't mind. Suddenly realised I need to open a bottle here. I don't have my bottle opener, so we'll be back in a couple of seconds. Cheers, me beers. Oh, delicious. Solange. Deliciouser. So, what's part deux of tonight's beer odyssey? It's the Harry Potter sounding Patronus Weiss beer from Lidl, German wheat beer, brewed in accordance to the German purity law. 5% volume of alcohol, that's all it says, really. Do like a German white beer, though. Reminds me of my trip to Belgium. Checks notes 33 years ago. Me and my friend Mike, and we stayed a couple of nights in Antwerp, and I think we stayed in Brussels as well, and we were entertained by a very nice man called Patrick, who took us to the local, we were staying with him, he took us to the local bar, and Mike and I were working our way through the Belgian beer menu. And I remember one of the ones we had was cherry beer. And I'll tell you a story about cherries in a second. Yeah, cherry beer. And Mike and I thought, we said, this is delicious. We like this. And our host, Patrick, leant over to us and he went, guys, you do know the cherry beer is for girls, don't you? And Mike and I looked at each other and we were like, oh, girls' beer. Oh. More cherry beer. It was delicious. But cherries. Having been out on the West Somerset Railway yesterday, when I left in the morning my cherry tree on the patio, let's see if I can find a photograph of it. Got the beer burps coming up again, folks. Oh, excuse me. So I'm just scrolls down. See if I can find this blessed picture of my cherry tree. Scrolls down. Oh, this is ridiculous. It should be. Oh, there we go. No, that's not it. Oh, here we go. Right. So you'll have to forgive the fact that I'm in this picture, but this is the point: is that my pot-bound cherry tree, you can see it behind me, absolutely teeming with fruit. And when I left it yesterday morning, absolutely covered in fruit. I've had a couple of the, oh, let's try it again. I've had a couple of the cherries on it, and it's delicious. They are lovely. And yeah, so went down to Minehead yesterday on the, went down on the steam train. When I came back last night, they'd all gone. What had happened whilst I was out during the day was the birds had absolutely cleaned the tree. They had stripped it bare. And I'm just going to see if I can find the photograph of what had happened. Yeah, here we go. So 24 hours before, covered in fruit. 24 hours later, not a Robbie sausage. Nothing, absolutely nothing, except on the ground, the telltale signs of cherry nuts, which I scooped up and I've put in a glass of water because I'm going to see if I can grow another cherry tree. Obviously, I'll grow another cherry tree. It's going to be years before it even fruits. So, but I'd be interested to see whether I can grow another cherry tree. So yeah, imagine my disappointment at coming home yesterday and all my cherries. I was looking forward to having some cherries. I thought this is brilliant. There are dozens on there, absolutely dozens. Nope. And my bird life in my garden decided that they had other ideas. Now, kind of bittersweet thing, really, because to some extent, I do cultivate my garden so that it is wildlife friendly. So, frankly, I only have myself to blame because I encourage the birds into the garden. And yeah, so here is a good example. This was the other day. This is, like I say, it's just 2 days ago. There is my cherry tree, absolutely full of cherries. There is a female blackbird getting stuck in. I think these are iPhone pictures that I did through my workshop window, but there she is, absolutely mothering my cherry tree. But what was interesting yesterday when I came home was all gone. And there were magpies making a racket because they'd obviously discovered that there were cherries there. And anyway, do you know what? I suddenly realised we're up to an hour mark, and I've been rattling on about bloody cherries for the last 10 minutes. So let's have some more ghost stories, shall we? Of the Grindon ghosts. Grindon is a remote moorland village in the Peak National Park, and due to its height above sea level, 800 feet, is frequently covered by low clouds and mist. In severe winters, it is often cut off from the outside world by snow. The severe winter of 1947 was one such winter. On Thursday, the 13th of February 1947, Halifax RT-922, a 4-engine bomber of number 47 Glider Towing Squadron, code letters M0HD, based at Fairford in Gloucestershire, literally just over the road there, crashed on Grindon Moor in Staffordshire, some 8 miles east of Leek, whilst dropping hay in the snow. All on board, including a number of pressmen, were killed. A memorial was erected in Grindon Church, and pieces of the wreckage dug up by aviation archaeologists can be found on a display board in the Cavalier Inn located in the centre of the village. The inn is an old building erected in the late 17th century and has been a public house for over 100 years. Formerly called the Shoulder of Mutton, probably when sheep drovers stopped while en route to market, the inn was renamed the Cavalier by a previous owner some 30 years ago. Sore throat. Strange me bar. Lovely. In February 1988, still feels like yesterday. Goodness me, what's that? 38 years ago. In February 1988, Bob Blunden purchased the inn, and it was not long before he began to hear about the alleged hauntings. The locals told of a grey-haired man dressed in grey. The locals told of a grey-haired man dressed in grey who would walk down the stairs from the private accommodation, walked along the front of the bar, and disappeared into the dining room. One barmaid had fled the inn on seeing this apparition. Initially, we treated the stories with some cynicism until we began to note various occurrences, said Bob Blunden. Glasses would move off the shelves and crash to the floor. One Thursday evening, a sherry barrel on a shelf behind the bar was lifted above the surrounding bottles and similarly crashed to the floor. This was witnessed by several customers. We also discovered that one of the reasons the previous owners sold was because the wife was scared of the ghost. On other days, there would be a smell at the end of the bar akin to rotting compost, which I could smell, but my wife could not. Similarly, when resting upstairs in the private lounge, my wife frequently complained about a horrible smell, and from her description, it was the same as the smell that I experienced in the bar. On many occasions, as we closed up for the night, we heard a small child's voice come from the dining room saying, "Night, night," and we both felt a presence on the stairs of a small animal. Frequently, the heavy inner door to the main bar would open and close, yet nobody entered the pub. One bank holiday, we were talking to some customers about our experiences, and they decided not to tell us that their daughter, who was allegedly psychic, was visiting them the following day. The following day, I noted the customers talking to their daughter, all sitting on an old leather settee. It says old leather settle, but I think they mean settee, in the dining room, when suddenly a suit of armour at the end of the dining room fell over with a loud crash. The daughter said that she saw a little boy push it, yet there was nobody else in the dining room. Glasses continued to crash to the floor, and a pint mug would suddenly start to swing like mad on the hooks above the bar. In addition, the beer would mysteriously switch off in the cellar. Then one night after we had retired, we awoke to my son screaming. On climbing up to his bedroom in the attic, he was screaming, "Keep her away from me!" We comforted him and told him he was dreaming, but further investigation revealed that Roy Shenton, a previous barman at the pub, had slept in the same room and had experienced visitations from a woman with long grey hair dressed in a long black dress. He said that she used to sit on the end of his bed and he used to pull the covers over his head, hoping that she would go away. Eventually, he ended up having medical treatment as his nerves got so bad. The smells and disturbances continued until we left the pub in June 1990. As far as I am aware, they continue to this day. Definitely deserves a thunderclap, that. Run VT. Oh my goodness me, folks. We were up at stupid this morning. Once it's light outside, I can't sleep. I'm not a great one for having lie-ins. And oh, we haven't topped up the bump, for goodness sake. Falling asleep on the job here. Yeah, so I'm not one for lie-ins, and especially in the summer, as soon as it starts getting light outside, there's only so much of a podcast or a radio show that I can listen to. And then it's like, no, I've got to get up, get on with the day, crack on with work, especially if you're self-employed. So hopefully, once I've had something to eat, I might be out like a light. So, uh-oh. We've done it again. It's another dead soldier. And run, BT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Blotting out the past. Having just obtained the 3 Ghost Stations books, it is Hornchurch and North Weald entries which prompted me to contact you, said Desmond Keen. And Desmond's information may help many of my readers understand why the old airfields have a tear on the wind, as their historic past was sadly blotted out. Desmond Keen continues, as a mere National Service shorthand typist, my first posting was to the Aviation Candidate Selections Board at RAF Hornchurch in October 1946. I had previously been stationed at Euston House in London, and it was here only a lodger unit housed in the central hangar, which always seemed like a great empty cathedral to me. All one could see from the office windows on those late winter afternoons was the grim approach of the evening mists over the deserted airfield. No one ever spoke to us of the wartime glories of the place. The iron hand of authority seemed anxious to blot out the station's battle experiences and return everything to pre-war RAF standards. I remember seeing the last of the aircrew wall painting being obliterated from the old barrack blocks on the square soon after I got there. The ACSB staff lamented the loss of their convenient spot in London, and morale was poor, especially as we suffered the 1947 winter there. The unit was moved north to North Weald in April 1947, reasons unknown. And then, to our dismay, we had to return to Hornchurch in October 1948. By then, the name had been changed to the Combined Selection Centre, CSC, and it is at this point I was puzzled by the entry in Book 1, page 154, which refers to a large rambling building on the edge of the airfield. It had formerly been used as the officers' mess. We understood that it was the sergeants who had all been evicted from their fine modern premises. Much bad feeling, in order to provide us with offices and interview rooms, as the work had grown and the hangar offices were inadequate. I remained there until March 1949, and once again, for me and my friends, it was an unhappy place. And because they squashed the memories of those gallant airmen, they return, like the ghost of Montrose, to haunt the old airfields. I'm sorry, Bruce, that's a stretch. That's a hell of a reach, Bruce. Right. What are we up to? Oh, hour and 11 minutes. We're going to have some more Japanese style rice snacks. Just seeing if eBay is playing ball yet. Right. Right, my eBay. Right, here we go. Ghost Stations. Ghost Stations Ivy. Wait for the phone to play catch up here. Should move my router booster upstairs, but no, I'm just having a look. We're full signal up here. All delicious. Slide. I'm not getting anything here at the moment. Let's try it. So let's try it again. Ghost Stations Ivy. Shopping. eBay. Right. Right. So, okay, £7.58 or best offer. Buy it now. Sign in with passkey. Oh, for goodness sake. No, we'll do it after the show. Sorry, folks. I just got sucked into that. Oh, do apologise. Let's have a quick swig of the old scotch in the magnificent United Federation of Planet Shot Glass. Again, courtesy of viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States. God bless you. Oh, right. More hauntings at Royal Air Force Leeming. In book 4 of Ghost Stations, I know, I'm trying to order it, Bruce. There is a story, The Most Haunted Airfield, RAF Leeming, and the old airfield continues to live up to that title. In book 1, Ghost Stations, we have the story, The Ghosts of RAF Leeming. And in that story, I do explain the history of the wartime airfield so that readers can understand the role it played and understand the sadness and sorrow. It is therefore easy to understand the hauntings by the phantom air crews. A few years ago, an army military bandsman was staying with the band at RAF Leeming. They had practiced hard during the day and were taking a well-earned drink in the bar that evening when suddenly a military policeman rushed into the bar. He looked terrified, said the army bandsman. He then blurted out that whilst doing his security round, the lights had come on in the hangar that he knew was locked and no one was inside. It transpired that the lights had come on in what was known as It transpired that the lights had come on in what was known on the station as the haunted hangar, and that the station policeman had quickly gone to get help. Partly, if it was an intruder, help would be on hand, but also proved that there was a supernatural force should no intruder be found. Bruce, your punctuation here is terrible. Oh, awful. When the backup force arrived at the hangar in question, sure enough, the hangar lights were on. And after checking that the hangar was still securely locked with no visible points of entry, the sergeant decided that it was someone playing the fool, knowing it was the alleged haunted hangar. However, to be on the safe side, he put in 2 trained police dogs in order to calm everyone's nerves. "We'll leave the dogs in for the rest of the night," he said, "and take them out at shift change in the morning." The following morning, needless to say, the dogs had to be destroyed. The hangar in question was well known for its strange and eerie atmosphere. In certain sections, it would suddenly go very cold and tools would go missing, a bit like my workshop. Many of those who have worked in the haunted hangar believe it is the ghosts of the 2 crew members of a Gloucester Javelin jet fighter that had crashed on landing, killing both crew. The wreckage of the jet had been stored in that hangar. In June 1957, number 228 Operational Conversion Unit arrived at Royal Air Force Leeming, and it was tasked with the training of crews for the ever-increasing number of Javelin squadrons, and the first course began in October 1957. Then, much to the bewilderment of the staff, it was decided to disband 228 Operational Conversion Unit in the late summer of 1961. The Javelin OCU had done an excellent job, and the government thought that there were enough trained Javelin crews, but it was another high-level blunder. The Javelin was to remain in service for 7 more years, necessitating the reformation of other training units from 1963 onwards. That could explain the haunting, but there are so many unexplained happenings, it is much more than just one incident. A telephone in the hangar keeps ringing, and when answered, a chilling voice calls the name of an aircrew member. They are the phantoms of RAF Leeming. Sorry, folks. Throat's starting to go a bit. Do apologise. I think we'll do another couple, and then that'll be it. Probably up to nearly 90 minutes. Good news, you had your money's worth tonight. Sloan. Might be a 3 bumper tonight. Cheers. Oh, got some fan mail. Let's read the fan mail. Right, see if I can order this blessed book now. So, eBay, Ghost Stations 4. Just not connecting at all here at the moment. Let's just turn the Wi-Fi off, turn the Wi-Fi back on again. No, not a Robbie sausage. Never mind. The Red 4 Mystery. When, on the 27th of May 1942, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Panzer Afrika Korps began to move forward, it forestalled a British offensive already ordered to begin early in June, for which General Claude Auchinleck had tried to husband forces. Immediately after the failure of the Axis attempt to break through to the Delta in September 1942, the British Eighth Army began to prepare for a full-scale offensive timed to take place about the middle of October. For many days, a fierce battle raged at El Alamein. The part played by the Royal Air Force in the desert campaigns was truly tremendous. The Desert Air Force and the 8th Army were one big fighting family working with a single purpose: to destroy Rommel's Afrika Korps. Should be a colon or a hyphen there, Bruce, but never mind. The Royal Air Force in the Western Desert had a very difficult task. What may be called the cinema impression of a desert is nothing like the Western Desert. The sandstorms so often mentioned are more frequently choking clouds of dust rather than sand. Vast stretches are hard, firm going, except after rain, and resemble flat rock more than anything else. Among the more disagreeable features are the flies. They are filthy, pertinacious, excruciating pestilence. When General von Ravenstein, commander of the 21st German Armed Division, was captured, he said, "The desert is the tactician's paradise, but the quartermaster's hell." Those of the Desert Air Force, nicknamed the Flying Desert Rats, had more than just the heat of the battles to contend with. Their desert base was just a sand landing strip, no concrete, tarmac, or grass runways. There were over 200 landing grounds, LGs for short, in North Africa, and very few of them had names. Usually it was just a number. Some existed for years, others only a few days. Their base consisted of just a sand strip surrounded by featureless desert. No buildings, just a few tents. All Royal Air Force fighter squadrons had only one pilot's mess tent when on operations. This was used by all pilots and any other officers, and usually consisted of some 30 personnel. Quick swig of the old beer. Slangs me well. Oh, I think it is going to be a 3-bumper tonight. Cheers. On Monday, the 27th of July, 1942, 12 Hurricane fighters of A Flight, number 33 Squadron, took off from landing ground 92 for a dawn patrol over El Alamein. Their flight brief, a fighter sweep over El Alamein at Angels 1-5. And for the uninitiated, that is 15,000 feet rather. Oh, the beer burps again. Do apologise. One of those flying desert rats on that dawn patrol was Sergeant Edward Stott. "We met no enemy fighters on this patrol, but halfway back to base, it was noted that Red 4 was lagging behind the formation," he said. Red 4 was the code name for Sergeant Pilot Lester, a new pilot with the squadron who was on his first desert dawn patrol. Edward Stott continues, My flight commander, Flight Lieutenant Lance Wade, the famous American ace fighter pilot, quickly issued a command. "Red leader to Red 4, catch up, you are too far behind." This command was shortly repeated. "Red leader to Red 4, catch up formation and hold your position." But Red 4 continued to drop further and further behind. Suddenly, 2 Messerschmitt 109s were seen above and behind us. They dived on Red 4, and he was shot down in flames. We returned to base and landed, then went to the mess tent for our delayed breakfast. Here we met B Flight, who had now finished their breakfast. We discussed our flight and the sad loss of young Sergeant Pilot Lester. They looked very surprised and said we must be mistaken. "And why must we be mistaken?" we asked. And they replied almost in unison, Because Sergeant Lester had breakfast with us here half an hour ago. The pilots of B Flight were adamant they had all seen Sergeant Lester, and their stance only deepened the mystery of Red 4. Quick swig of the old beer. Strange. I think we'll have a quick top up of the old quick top up of the old scotch. Try again. The pilots of B Flight were adamant that they had all seen Sergeant Lester, and their stance only deepened the mystery of Red 4. Edward Stott continues with the now deeply baffling Red 4 mystery. The B Flight pilots claimed that Sergeant Lester had indeed breakfast with them, was confronted by... The B Flight pilots claimed that Sergeant Lester had indeed breakfast with them, was confronted by several officers who were present in the mess tent. They were completely mystified by my denial, which was backed up by my colleagues, when we insisted that it was impossible for the young pilot to have been in the mess tent that morning, because they in turn had seen Sergeant Lester's Hurricane fighter disappear in flames. B Flight finally accepted the loss of the new pilot, but all the officers who were witness to the incident were deeply puzzled by it. Sergeant Pilot Edward Stott went on to fly Spitfires with number 145 Squadron Desert Air Force, the squadron leader commanding the squadron being none other than my good friend Neville Duke, featured in my first Ghost Stations, page 98, and in my Ghost Stations 2, page 154, 155, and his photograph on 155 also. Edward Stott spent 4.5 years in the Middle East. Today, he is a retired aircraft design engineer. His early flight commander became Wing Commander Lance Wade, winning the Distinguished Flying Cross with 2 bars and the Distinguished Service Order. He was killed in a flying accident in Italy on Thursday, the 13th of January, 1944. I think that's going to have to be it for tonight, folks. I'm just having a quick look to see whether we can squeeze AN other. Yeah, I think we can squeeze AN other in. Yeah, what the hell. Flange me bar. Oh, good health. But in order to do that, we are going to have some Japanese style mixed rice snacks. The College Road Ghost. I had just finished reading your book, Ghost Stations 3, said Derek Smith. I found the little bit about Hornchurch interesting, as I now live very near the old Hornchurch fighter station. Also the story about Hendon, for in 1957 I spent 13 weeks at Hendon Police College, which I believe at that time used a lot of the old buildings belonging to Hendon Airfield as a mess hall and dormitories, etc. I regret to say nothing I saw in that 13 weeks was in the least bit ghostly. Should be those 13 weeks, never mind. However, I do have a story which happened to me when I was a child, and I thought that it was about time I told someone about it before it gets put down to the ramblings of an old man. If you wanted the ramblings of an old man, tune in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories. Derek Smith's story, extra. Derek Smith's story is such an interesting one that I had to include it. It is not one with airfields. Nevertheless, it does have some bearing from the fact of being able to understand the reason behind the ghostly visit, in this case, the jawbone. I would like to make it clear that the house in which Derek Smith then lived, number 19 College Road, was originally gaslit, and all the fittings for the electric light were all converted. Gas mantles fitted to the wall. His bedroom was at the back of the house, and the ceiling sloped with the roof line. Thus, the only place for his bed was in front of the door. The window was at the foot of the bed, slightly to the left. Derek Smith continues. I was born on the 11th of September 1938 in a small two-up, two-down wooden weatherboarded cottage in College Road, Epsom, Surrey. I lived in that cottage with my parents and younger sister until I was 14 years, when we all moved to a council house on the other side of town. When I was 10 or 11 years old, I was helping my father to dig a plot in the garden ready for planting when I turned up a lower human jawbone complete with teeth. I cleaned it under the tap to free it of all the chalky soil which was adhering to it, and took it into the house. I thought no more of it, and my father said we should take it to the police the following day. I went to bed that night at my normal time and fell asleep. I woke suddenly during the night. The moon was up and was shining through the small window at the foot of my bed. In the light standing next to my bed, which was the old-fashioned kind with a head and footboards and a metal frame, was the figure of a man. He was about 5 feet 10 and dressed in cavalier dress, a large hat with feather, knee breeches, and a sort of short jacket or coat over his right shoulder, and a shirt with puff sleeves. But the funny thing was that he was grey and semi-transparent, yet he looked solid. I took all this in the few seconds that I looked at him. The only way out of my small bedroom was touching the figure. The only way out of my small bedroom without touching the figure was over the headboard, which is the way I went without taking my eyes from the figure. I hit the light switch and the figure vanished. I woke my parents, who told me that it was just the moonlight shining through the net curtain over my window. I did not believe them, and I do not think that they believed it either. Oh, the beer burp's again. Do apologise. The following day, the jawbone was reburied deeply in the garden, and although I was frightened, I had to sleep in that bedroom for the next few years until we moved house. I never saw anything else in my bedroom, and although the moonlight continued to shine through my window at night, it never again took on human shape. I firmly believe that I saw the ghost owner of that lower jaw, and that he wanted it put back into the earth where, I presume, that the rest of his body was buried. My parents told nobody of my experience, so if the cottages are still there and the area has not been redeveloped, I would like to think that he lies under the ground in the cottage garden. Definitely deserves a thunderclap, that. that's it for tonight, folks. Oh my goodness me. Cheers, me beard. Magnificent. Slange. Magnificenter. Take the glasses down because I'll wash them for Sunday. Oh my goodness me. That's it for tonight. We are going to go downstairs and watch the football, or indeed Family Guy, depends what mood I'm in. Fingers crossed. We'll be back for, brace yourselves, Sunday Night Ghost Stories on a Sunday as nature intended. So until then, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why? Why not? What else are you going to do on a Friday in early June than watch a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head, drink ghost stories, and read alcohol? Come on, folks, you can do better. I can't. I am trapped in this tragic existence, but you can do better. Anyway, until next time, stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please don't have nightmares. Good night.